In the early hours before dawn, April 1944, General Masaru Hanada awoke in a cold sweat inside his tent on the Burmese front. He had seen a dream, not a nightmare, not a vision, but a battle. Every hill, every explosion, every order he gave in that dream felt real. And in it, he lost. He saw his men trapped in a fog that swallowed sound, saw his tanks burned to ash by invisible fire, and heard a voice, deep, ancient, whispering in Japanese. You cannot fight what has already been written. Hanada was not a superstitious man. He was an officer of the Imperial Japanese Army, trained, disciplined, and mercilessly logical. But as dawn broke, he ordered his entire regiment to retreat before the British even attacked. 2 hours later, Allied bombers struck their previous position, destroying everything in minutes. His commanders accused him of cowardice. But the records show that every man who stayed behind died that morning. That was the first dream. And it would not be the last. Masaru Hanada had been known as the Iron Mind, a tactician famed for his precision and control. But after the Burma campaign began, soldiers whispered that their general had changed. He no longer relied on maps or scouts. He would wake from sleep, stare silently into the fog, and issue orders that made no sense, until hours later, they turned out right. When a supply convoy disappeared, he ordered his engineers to dig trenches in a pattern shaped like a spiral. When his officers questioned him, he said only, because that's how it looked in the dream. Days later, British artillery shells landed exactly along the outer ring of those trenches, leaving his men untouched in the center. His predictions grew so uncanny that other divisions began secretly asking him for guidance. And every time he dreamed, he wrote it down in a small black notebook, a notebook that would later vanish from history. Some say he was psychic. Others claim he had simply learned to see patterns beyond logic. But those who served under him knew one thing for certain: the general no longer slept like a man. He slept like someone who was waiting to wake in another world. In late 1944, the Japanese command ordered Hanada to defend Hill 305, a crucial point overlooking the Irrawaddy River. It was an impossible task. The British had superior numbers, air support, and terrain advantage. But Hanada smiled when he saw the orders. He said quietly to his aide, "I've already seen this place." That night, he dreamed again, of a battle so bright that the river itself turned red. He saw the enemy approach in perfect formation, saw his men firing until their rifles melted, saw a storm of light descending from the clouds. But unlike before, this dream didn't end in defeat. It ended with silence, and a strange symbol drawn in the mud, a circle split by 3 lines. At dawn, Hanada ordered his engineers to carve that same pattern into the ground using oil barrels and ditches. He said it was for terrain mapping. Hours later, Allied bombers appeared, but when they released their payloads, the rising smoke from the pattern distorted their view. Their bombs fell short, detonating in the river instead of on the hill. The explosion created a pressure wave that destroyed the advancing Allied pontoon bridges. Hanada's small unit, against all odds, held the line for 3 days. When the smoke cleared, the Irrawaddy glowed with burning oil, just as he had seen in his dream. After the war, surviving documents reveal that Allied intelligence knew about Hanada. A British field report from 1945 described him as an officer with inexplicable predictive capability, possibly a product of experimental indoctrination or mass psychological conditioning. Rumors spread that Hanada had been part of a covert pre-war study in Tokyo, a program exploring military intuition and prophetic cognition. The project was called Kokoro, meaning the mind's heart. Japanese researchers, inspired by Buddhist meditation and Western neurology, believed that through extreme sensory deprivation, a mind could transcend time. Hanada had reportedly volunteered in 1938, enduring isolation for 40 days in total darkness. When he emerged, he claimed he could feel future movements, like ripples in a pond. The military shelved the experiment, until the war grew desperate. Historians now think Hanada's dreams were not mere visions, but a broken form of nonlinear perception. He wasn't seeing the future. He was reliving it. When Japan surrendered in 1945, Hanada disappeared. His name was never listed among POWs or casualties. But in 1952, an American intelligence officer in Tokyo received an anonymous package. Inside was a single object, a black leather notebook. Its pages were filled with coordinates, names, and sketches of battles. Some that had happened, and others that hadn't happened yet. One entry, dated August 9, 1945, read, "The fire comes from the sky. Not for us, but for all." That was the day Nagasaki was bombed. The last page simply said, "If I am dreaming, may I never wake. For in the dream, I already saw the end." The notebook vanished into the archives of the U.S. Strategic Intelligence Command. Its authenticity was never confirmed. But decades later, when the files of the Kokoro project were declassified, one note stood out. It described a test subject known only as MH. It stated, "Subject enters REM state simultaneously with combat events. Dream manifests prior to occurrence. Recommend termination of study. Predictive threshold exceeded." No one ever found General Hanada's remains. Yet, soldiers stationed near the old Burmese front still tell a story. Sometimes, on misty nights, they hear footsteps outside their camps, slow, deliberate. A man's shadow passes by their tents. And if they listen closely, they hear a voice whisper in Japanese, "I have seen this before." Because some wars, safe, are fought once in reality, and forever in dreams.